Hello and welcome to the Line Survivor podcast. It is Matt Brown. It is Stephen Andrus, and I wish we had the rights to Queen because we would start playing We Are the Champions, only to fade that into, no, we are not. We are the biggest losers on the face of the planet. Dunzo. All three of my entries in Circus Survivor up in smoke thanks to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Also, same can be said for my good friend Stephen Andrus. We're going to continue to give you guys content, all 12 of you that are left out there. We're going to talk for at least for the next few weeks on what we think we would do had we not burnt our entries up into flames. But Stephen, as we were watching that game, or as I was watching that game, and I want to get your opinion on this as well, there was about midway through the first quarter, after missed field goal, blocked field goal, all these like ridiculous turnovers, and I go, I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose this game. Like, I just had the feeling where it was like, I know there's a lot of people who are holding on to hope that this is going to turn around, but I actually never really got that. I was like, oh, this is going downhill and I'm going to lose.
I still held out a little bit of hope right up until the kickoff to the up man, who was a big, thick Mike Allstott looking fullback who rumbled 85 yards for a touchdown.
Who fumbled it, who muffed it, and then picked it up and then ran it 85 yards for a touchdown, which prompted me to put out a tweet in which I might actually follow through with this, where I'm going to put together a masterclass for the offseason. Guess what? Division I programs, you can hire me. NFL teams, you can hire me. I'm going to come in and all I'm going to do is teach your kickers and punters how to run at an angle as opposed to actually playing this guy. I mean, like, listen, whether he would have been able to do anything, he would at least been able to slow him down just a tad, and then maybe someone could have caught this fullback that was running down the sideline. Steven, the kicker, ran right at him as the guy's running in the other direction, and then he just ran right by him. It's like, no, man, play an angle. How do you not know how to run at an angle? It's insanity to me that this isn't like, you practice kicking, and then when you're not practicing kicking, you go, okay, what do we do if things go south? And then you just sit there and practice running at angles, and so you can slow guys down long enough to where somebody else can come and catch him and tackle him. But again,
get Pat McAfee to do it. McAfee in his day leveled dudes when they got to him as the last line of defense. Get McAfee in there to have a clinic on how to tackle.
That being said, it was not the only carnage last week. The Ravens go down. That was also carnage. The Cowboys go down. That was also carnage. So where we're at in most of these contests is there's only about 25 to 30% of the field left in the vast majority of these Survivor contests out there. So 7 out of every 10 entries has been lit on fire through the first 3 weeks of the season. And Steven, I go back in this and listen, if tattoos weren't permanent, I would get the one that had the no regrets just across, I would have done it for this podcast and then we could have gotten rid of it. But I planned out 3 different routes that I thought were optimal to try to make it towards the end. The one with the Jags last week was the one that I felt the most confident in, that was the most optimal for me to try to make it to the end. Because again, it doesn't matter if you make it, whether I'm out in week 3 or week 9, it doesn't matter. I've got to make it to the end, right? And so I was charting out a path that I thought was the optimal way for me to try to make it to the end. I didn't see another place for me to be able to use the Jags. I was going to have to use 20 different NFL teams in theory if I made it to the end, because I'm in the circuit contest where there's 2 extra weeks in there as well. There are several teams I'm really never going to feel confident using. So, the Jags were going to have to be one of the 20 teams I use most likely. And so it just is what it is, right? They played the absolute worst game a team can possibly play. But I honestly don't have any regrets, because it was the only other option would have been to play the Seahawks. But after the Seahawks got Andy Dalton as opposed to Bryce Young, then, I thought Andy Dalton was going to be able to. And honestly, he did put up a pretty decent fight, in that game. And so I didn't want to go in that direction. So it just is what it is. And, there's always next year, as they say.
We're always going to be transparent on these podcasts for lines.com. We came right out and told you we're up in dust. We're up in smoke for Survivor. But I also just want to say, in my experience betting on the NFL and contests, etc., Survivor is the single most difficult thing to win that I've come across. It is really hard to win a Survivor contest. And I was sitting there right around kickoff at 1 o'clock on Sunday, And I had my entry split. I had the Jags on one and another team on the other. And I'm like, I don't really like this team's injury report. I'm just going to double down on the Jags. And sure enough, that other team I went away from was the Baltimore Ravens, and it didn't matter anyway. So I guess the only question I have for you before we move on to week 4 here is, would you be more likely in the future to split up your entries and not go all in on one team in a given week?
I would not, mainly because, like I said, like for me, it's different. Like it would be different if there were tiered payouts or something like that or whatever. And then at that point, it would make more sense. But this, survivor contests are all or nothing, right? I mean, it's you got to make it to the end. So for me, I'd rather have the most bullets towards the end, where then I could use the strategy you're talking about, right? Where now I can really and truly put myself in a position to maybe actually win the damn thing if I have multiple bullets by the time we get to week, let's call it 12, 13, 14, whatever it might be somewhere along the way. But yeah, I don't think that would ever be a strategy for me until I got really deep into one of these, is splitting up the entries. Because again, I want the most bullets to try to actually win the contest, and like, I'm not playing to like squeak by to advance. Like I'm playing to win, and so that's kind of how I am this week. It's why we talk about the strategy that we talk about on this, where yes, there were more obvious plays last week, which by the way, one of those obvious plays was the Cowboys, and they lose. So I mean, it's like you're not even, you're not even guaranteed even when you play one of the obvious plays. And so, I mean, for me, I have a higher risk tolerance though than a lot of people do. I don't necessarily know if that's a strategy for everyone out there, but again, I'm playing to win. I'm not in it to like just get 6 weeks of enjoyment or 8 weeks of enjoyment. That doesn't matter to me. Like I'm trying to take it down. And so with that, I think the best thing for me is to have the most opportunity to do it.
I love it. Process over results every single time. I like it.
So let's head on here to week 4. And there are not a lot of big favorites here on the card in week 4. The first big favorite would be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. They are 8.5 point favorites if you wanted to go in that direction. The Los Angeles Chargers are 6 point favorites over the Raiders. Raiders likely to be without Jimmy Garoppolo in that game. Dallas Cowboys 7 point favorites over the New England Patriots. 49ers, again, this is going to be the theme every week. They're probably always going to be an option for you. 14 point favorites over the Cardinals this week. Chiefs 9.5 over the Jets. That is all the favorites of 6 points and above there, Steven. That's all we got this week. And again, some of these teams you've either likely used or maybe want to save for future weeks, depending on which type of contest you're in and which contest you are in. So it is at least an interesting conversation this week.
It is, definitely. We partner with Pool Genius. You can find the link down in the description, and they pull together all of the data from all the big national survivor pools that are out there to make sure that you understand which teams are going to be the most popular in any given week. Last week was a massacre. The most popular team, Jaguars, go down. So if you were just blindly fading the most popular team, you may have survived last week if you're using the Pool Genius tool. So they're giving 3-day trials for it. You can find the link in the description. Just looking at one of the national pools, the ESPN Eliminator Challenge, it's a clear top 3 among those that, at least early in the week, are going to have double-digit percentage pick this week. The most popular is the 49ers at 29% as we record this on Tuesday morning. Again, a lot of time before now and kickoff where the rest of the people in the pool could sign in, so take this for what it's worth. But 49ers 29%, Eagles 13%, hosting the Commanders, and the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football at the Jets and Zach Wilson at 10% picked. After that, I do just want to mention the next two because they are not too far behind the Chiefs. The Steelers at 9% at Houston and the Vikings 8% at Carolina. With the Vikings defense, man, I'm good, man. Like, I'm not interested, even though the Panthers have looked terrible.
Yeah, no, I am not either. I guess the question becomes is if you are a gambler and you are looking to move on playing a team that maybe you're not going to feel completely comfortable playing moving forward, I think all eyes then point to the Chargers, right? Do you want to play the Chargers in a week in which they get the Raiders with a backup quarterback? The Raiders obviously don't look very good as it is in the first place, and then now you're going to be with I'm guessing they're going to go with Aiden O'Connell. I don't know. I mean, I guess they could go elsewhere, but he was the one who got
Josh
the most.
McDaniels makes the right decision, Matt,
Right.
and I think we've established he doesn't always make the right
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess Aiden O'Connell making his first NFL start. I don't know, but regardless, it would be a team that's not very good in the first place with a backup quarterback. So, Steven, how comfortable would you feel playing the Chargers? Of course, they come off a really, really impressive offensive performance last week, but this defense is still a bit suspect.
Well, Aiden O'Connell looked fantastic in the preseason, but we've also established that doesn't mean much after Kenny Pickett had a perfect passer rating in the preseason and then looked like crap the first 2 weeks against actual NFL solid defenses. At the same time, the Chargers defense is not very good. So if it is O'Connell, there's at least some theoretical upside athleticism with a young quarterback where I'd be a little nervous about taking the Chargers in that spot. If it's Brian Hoyer, fire at will, man. Like if it's Brian Hoyer this week, who is technically number 2 on the depth chart, I believe, then I'm in, because I mean the market agrees too. This money line went from minus 200 at open around there to now with the Jimmy Garoppolo uncertainty, you're looking at around minus 250. So that's kind of where I'm at. Hoyer, yes. O'Connell, I'm going to probably take somebody else.
If you're looking, I mean, the 49ers, like we said, are probably going to be in play more weeks than not. And the only reason I would say I would not play them, Steven, and again, this all depends on how deep your pool is, how many people are left, all the different stuff like that, right? Like if you're only in like 100-person pool and there's only 20 people left, and at this point, you can almost throw strategy out the window and just literally you're just trying to advance every single week, let everyone else get cute, and you might win your thing. But in these ones where there's still several hundred or even several thousand that are left in there, you know, I love having a team in which if a week gets tough, I can just pull them out and at least feel confident no matter what playing with it. And that's kind of where you're at with the 49ers, right? It's like any tough week, if you were like, damn, I just don't have a team I like this week, you can at least know if you play the 49ers, you have a pretty damn good chance of advancing, right? Like, because they are going to win way more games than they're going to lose, and their schedule also is going to give them a lot of games in which they're going to be, like we're talking about, like our cutoff for this, for the top teams we were talking about was like 6-point favorites or more. Like, they're going to be 6-point favorites or more in a lot of games, you know? And so, like, for me, I love having that team in my back pocket, but again, this all depends on the size and how many people are left in your pool. If you're down to 8 people because your pool's only 50 people big, like just win every week from here on out. Like don't worry about future strat. Because this thing's going to be over by midseason anyway. So like you can throw future value out the window.
Yeah. Looking at the 49ers, if you want to save them for the next time they play the Cardinals, it's not until week 15. And even though they are dominant and they're, you know, among the highest power rated teams in the NFL, they have a stretch after this Arizona game where you at least would be a little bit nervous. Home against Dallas, at Cleveland, who has just as good of a defense as the Niners, at Minnesota, tough place to play, at least a punchy offense. Home against Cincinnati, we know the upside of the Bengals if Burrow and company are firing on all cylinders. Then you have a bye week where you can't play them, and then at Jacksonville, who's off to a slow start, but again, we've seen their ceiling.
And it's a road game.
It's a road game.
Road game across the country.
Theoretically, you might not be comfortable playing the Niners until week 11 when they're playing Tampa or week 12 at Seattle. So that's a long gap to have to save the Niners. So I think that's partially what's going into making them the most popular pick, at least right now, projected in one of the national pools.
Yeah, for me, I guess I would probably be looking at the Chiefs this week. The Jets, we know offense is just completely inept, and it doesn't really matter how good the defense is at this point. The defense only gave up 15 points this past week, and they still lost by 5. And so if that tells you anything, and that is an offense that is not near as potent in the Patriots than it is in the Chiefs, it's kind of the same deal, right, Steven, where it's like, yeah, you'd rather keep the Chiefs, you'd rather hold on to the Chiefs, but I mean, I think it's pretty squarely, if I'm not playing the 49ers this week, I think the Chiefs are pretty squarely the play for me, and I can kind of deal with other stuff down the road.
Yeah, I think the other thing, too, is even if we get a curveball middle of the week here and they bench Zach Wilson, You really worried about Tim Boyle? Like, is
Right.
Tim Boyle really going to scare you against the Chiefs? I don't think so. The Jets could sign a veteran at some point. I think they'd be silly not to. I mean, what do you got to lose? But right now, they just can't move the ball whatsoever. I mean, at one point before that final drive when they were, getting some yardage, I think the yards per play was less than 2 for the
Yeah.
Jets, which is just, I mean, I can't fathom how horrible that is. So, looking at the Eagles schedule too, it's a lot harder than last year. That's the second most popular choice right now. It's a lot tougher schedule than it was last year. They get the Commanders this week, but they also have the Rams and the Jets the next couple of weeks. And then it really starts cranking up. Then you have Miami, Washington again, but Dallas, Kansas City, a bye week mixed in there, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas. So I think if you're not worried about who you're going to have left at the end and figure it out when you get there, then right now is kind of the 2-3 week window where you should consider using the Eagles, because there's going to be a big stretch there of about 2 months where you're not going to be comfortable using them. And this is kind of the spot for me, either Washington or LA or New York the next couple of weeks.
Yep. This is a prime opportunity for the Eagles as well. Like I honestly think you can't really said this last week, but I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the 3 bigs. Like, I just, if you go Eagles, if you go Chiefs, if you go 49ers, I don't see a route in which you could really be going wrong with all of that. Again, if you're trying to zig where other people are zagging, I think the Chargers, look, they don't have to cover 6, right? I mean, like they don't have to cover 6. This isn't a spread contest. It's just win and move on.
Yeah.
I think that they have enough offensive firepower to outscore the Raiders, even if this does end up this defense still can't figure out how to do anything, Steven. But like I've seen enough of this Chargers offense and enough of this Raiders defense, and certainly enough of what they kind of call an offense as well, to where I do have a pretty decent feeling that the Chargers, no matter what, would be able to outscore them. Now, this probably isn't a bet that's going to be in my account, because 6 is still a pretty decent amount of points for the Chargers to have to cover. But if we're just talking win and move on, I think it's a decent spot for them. And again, it comes down to that. How comfortable are you going to be using the Chargers down the line against anybody?
They won't be at the top of my list, but I will put them in my top 3. The reason I'm not putting them higher is because they also lost Mike Williams this week. And at this point, we don't know the quarterback situation. Like I said, if it's Brian Hoyer, I'm all for it. If it's not Brian Hoyer, it's one of these other 2 guys, then I'm a little nervous just because of their defense. So
I guess the other strategy I can ask is, like, we came into this season, Steven, saying, okay, pick on the Cardinals and you'll probably be okay in Survivor. Have we pivoted now to just pick on the Bears and, like, you'll be okay in Survivor? Now, not necessarily this week, because they're playing the only other team that's been as disappointing as them in the Broncos. But, when else are you going to play the Vikings? The Vikings, are play the Bears in a couple of weeks. When the Chargers do play the Bears a little bit down the line, if you want to hold on to them. The Saints play the Bears a little bit down the line, which would be, again, another team in the Saints where you're probably not feeling too comfortable playing them, except against maybe the Bears. So I think there's opportunities where, if you want to kind of do some planning for future weeks, circling some of these teams where you're never really going to feel great about playing them unless they're playing a team like the Bears. And then you can kind of start to see, okay, I'm going to use this team in week whatever. I'm going to use this team in week whatever. And it's probably because they're playing the Bears.
It's a great point, man. I hadn't thought of it till now, but I think people should pivot away from fading the Cardinals blindly after last week. I mean, that's 3 weeks in a row where they were at least competitive and making people nervous. So they're well coached at this point. We didn't, I think myself included, we're kind of making fun of Jonathan Gannon with some of the clips that were out there. And, he's a good coach, it seems, at this point. The early results are good. So the Bears, it's not just that they're losing games. It's how they're losing games. It's what's going on in the building. It's that Justin Fields might have been concussed and they still trotted him back out there last week in a complete blowout of a game. I don't know where to begin with this team. I said it a couple weeks ago, Matt. I was worried that this was going to be turning into like Urban Meyer levels of dysfunction.
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, this is as brutal as it gets.
Yeah. So that's at least another strategy, guys, as you just continue to plan throughout the course of the year. There might be some games you just want to kind of target playing against the Bears, and then that'll answer some questions as to, like, which teams you want to hold on to for a little bit further down the line. and get into your account. So what is your number one play of the week? And if you had, and if that play's already been used, then what would be your number two play of the week?
All right. So I'm not going to put the 49ers on there this week.
Yeah.
Because of just how popular they are. And it is a nice kind of bullet to have in the back pocket. So I certainly agree that it is, the most obvious pick, but it's also going to be the most popular. So I'll go backwards here because I honestly hadn't thought about 1 and 2 quite yet. But Chargers number 3, number 3 for me for all the reasons we've already talked about, but need Brian Hoyer at quarterback to feel really good about it. And then I'm going to go with the Eagles and the Chiefs in no particular order. I think they're both fine plays this week. And I think for all the reasons we talked about how tough the schedule is going to get for both of them down the road here, then it's worth firing one of them this week.
Yeah, I think number one for me, for most pools out there and most people watching this, is actually the Niners, just because there is, like you said, a pretty decent stretch where you're not going to feel completely comfortable using them, and your pool has likely been diminished down to a handful of players at this point. And so taking them as a very big home favorite against the Cardinals, I think, is actually the number one optimal way for me. Now, if I'm in a pool that still has several thousand players, this is what I would have done this week. I can tell you this with confidence. Steven can tell you this is not me just talking out of my ass. Like, this is what I would have played the Chargers this week because, again, I don't see a great spot. There is a Bears spot for the Chargers a little bit down the road, but like, the nature of that team in which they allow teams to just score points on them is always going to be scary. And now we get like an inept offense in the Raiders with a backup quarterback. And that's just where I would like to take advantage of being able to use a team like the Chargers and just get them out of the way and not have to think about them again anymore. So that's the route I would go in a big pool, thousands of people still left. So that'd be my second choice. And on the third side, it's like you said, it's kind of like, you're really kind of nitpicking, right? I mean, like, it's just as good to take the Chiefs as it is to take the Eagles this week. I mean, like, either one of those, they kind of fall in the same boat. There are going to be some tricky games coming up, but you still would probably feel like they're going to win the games, but you aren't 100% in on it. So my third choice is kind of flip a coin. If whichever team you haven't used yet would be the Eagles or the Chiefs for me is the third choice this week.
Yeah, I
ain't playing the Cowboys, though.
Yeah, the one caveat I'll say about fading the Bears is that they do have Washington next week, I think, which a lot of us have already used week 1 when they played Arizona. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, fading the Bears looks pretty good right now. I honestly wouldn't be all that worried about picking Denver this week the more I think about it.
Yep. I look, I'm not playing the Cowboys this week. Yeah, they're touchdown favorites, but the Patriots defense has shown up so far this year. Now the offense is terrible, but the defense has shown up this year, and there was some interesting, really like glaring holes for the Cowboys offense. Now look, they just look flat. I get it. It seemed like they probably thought they were going to go in there and just absolutely roll. It didn't end up happening, but we mentioned this a little bit in the preview pod last week, Steven, and I think it's relevant here to this Survivor conversation, is we were just kind of anointing the Cowboys without having seen them get tested at all this season. And then the Cardinals came out and put a drive on them. And then it was like, put them on their heels a little bit, and they didn't respond very well to getting put on their heels. And so I mean, the Patriots, could they shut them down for like 3 or 4 drives with that defense? And then maybe the Cowboys are looking up at a 6-0 deficit or something. The Patriots figure out a way to get a couple of field goals or something. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. So I'm actually would put the Cowboys, I guess, what would that be, 5th or 6th on the list this week as far as teams I would play.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't put them on my list, to be honest with you, because we need to see them make the adjustment on defense to not having Trayvon Diggs first to restore some confidence here. I think they'll be good in the long term, but the Patriots defense has been very sound. Their offense has had some issues, obviously, but they've also played some good defenses. For me, what's concerning most about the Cowboys is their offense if they get behind in games, because it's not just the Cardinals game. This is now 3 consecutive weeks where the Cowboys offense has had a below average yards per play if you go by last year's yards per play averages. Part of that was game script in week 1 and blowing somebody out. But when they needed to pass the ball often last week against Arizona, they couldn't do it, which was very concerning. And on top of that, Mike McCarthy, even in the most negative game script you could possibly get, still didn't get away from the running spots. Like, they're down near the goal line, in the red zone, down 2 scores with less than 4 minutes left, and they're running the ball on 1st and 2nd down. So I don't know what he's thinking, but we know he's ultra conservative. We know he wants to be balanced, and even in that situation, he didn't abandon the run, which is concerning to me. So I could absolutely see the Patriots slowing them down, making things difficult, and if they get behind here, I'd be concerned, because the ancillary weapons behind CeeDee Lamb did not impress last week. And if Christian Gonzalez shuts down CeeDee Lamb the way he did Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, then who on the Cowboys passing game can you rely on after that?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week. Like I said, we think there is a decent amount of good choices this week for you. It all just depends on how risk averse you are and how many people are left in your pool. Again, don't get too cute if there's only a handful of people left. It doesn't make that is not the proper EV at this point. Now, I think you can take some risks if you're still in circa, and you wanted to go with the Chargers this week. Like I said, that's probably what I would do if I was still in. But this is all kind of like pool dependent and how many people are there, and also how sharp are the people that you're in with your pool as well, right? Are they going to do something stupid? Are they going to try to get cute? And if that's the case, even more reason to stick to something that's a little bit more solid. So think about all those things as you go in and do all of this, guys. It was a little bit of a bummer that we are already out of this thing, but hey, so are 70% of the entries out there around the rest of the world. So it wasn't just us, Steven. It was everybody else too. And carnage here early on in the NFL season. No doubt about it. Guys, everything we do, absolutely free. So please go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below. Give us a thumbs up. Let us know in the comment section what you think about stuff. If you're listening to us on the audio side, if you want to go give us a 5-star review, we do appreciate that as well. For Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck on your week 4 Survivor picks.